All right, everybody. So welcome back. So in this segment, we are going to take a look at something called a compound operator in Java. Compound operator. So what is that? Okay, well, it's a shortcut. It turns out that in Java, or really any programming language for that matter, you probably come across um, at least one of these very, very common operations that you want to do. So here I have a little Java program set up. I have two variables. I have int val, which is 0, and I have a double, which is double val, which is 0, 0.0. Okay, now it's a very common occurrence that you would want to do something like this. So say I have a statement that says int val equals int val plus 5. Okay, say something like this. Okay, that's a very, very common occurrence. Whether it's a game or whatever, you're adding a certain amount to a previous value. Increment by 1, increment by 5, whatever. Subtract 1, subtract 5. Those are very, very common operations where you want to take a value, take its previous value, and change it by either adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. Okay, now these operations are so common that Java has come up with some really nice shortcuts for this. Okay, so now as it is, let me just put in a little print statement here just to verify the value. Okay, so obviously at this point, when I run this program, I should get a value of 5 printing out because I take int val, which initially had a value of 0, and I add 5 to it, and I obviously get 5, which I do. Okay, now here's a shortcut. So when you have one of these shortcuts, they're called a compound operator. So instead of int val equals int val plus 5, I could have also written it, the shortcut for writing it, using one of these so-called compound operators, looks like that. Int val plus equals 5. Okay, what I have there, that statement that I have there is a shortcut for the way I had it initially, which was int val equals int val plus 5. Okay, so this, line 9, using this so-called compound operator, this plus equals operator, is a shortcut for this, int val equals int val plus 5. Okay, now if I run it, I should get exactly the same result, which is 5, and which I do. Kind of jumped the gun there, but I'm so confident that I'm going to say before even the value comes out 5. Okay, so these so-called compound operators, plus equals is if I want to add or increment an old value by a certain amount. So if I want to increment my value by 5, I would use this plus equals operator. Okay, now you can use that. So these compound operators exist for not only addition. If you want to add a certain amount, I could subtract. Okay, so let's say instead of adding 5, I wanted to subtract 5 each time, or in one instance. So if I do that, int val minus equals 5, what I'm saying is int val equals int val minus 5 is the equivalent statement. So if I run it, this time I should get negative 5 as a result, because I start with 0, and I say take 0, the old value, and subtract 5. Okay, which I do, I get negative 5. Okay, so these compound operators are just kind of shortcuts for doing some very common data manipulations in Java. Now, I can also do that with multiplication and division. So let's say, let me change this a little bit. Let's say I change the initial value of int val is 1. Okay, actually, let's make it 2, so it's a little bit more obvious. So say I give it an initial value of 2, and let's say I want to multiply the old value by, say, 6. I could do that by typing something like this. Int val star equals 6. Remember, in Java or most other programming languages, the star, the asterisk, which is shift 8 on most keyboards, is your multiplication sign. So int val star equals 6 means int val equals int val times 6. So if my original value is 2, if I execute the statement, I should get a value of 12 as my output. Okay, so let's just double check. Run it, and I'm going to jump the gun. I'm going to say it is going to be 12 because I'm so confident that it is 12. Okay, so you can do, you can even do multiplication, and you can also do division. Okay, so let's say I make int val, give it an initial value, say, of 20. Okay, so if I want to say divide by 4, take the old value and divide by 4, I can do it like this. So int val slash equals 4 would be another way of saying int val equals int val divided by 4 slash 4. So what I should get, if I take my initial value 20 divided by 4, I should get 5. So when I run it, and here we go. I'm so confident again that I should get 5. I'm going to say yes, it is 5. Okay, so these compound operators are just really just shortcuts. Now you're going to see those a lot. People like to use those because they're just anything you can do to decrease the amount of typing is really useful and really something that you're going to want to take advantage of. So people use that a lot. So when you see them, remember it's just a shortcut for saying like this is a shortcut for saying int val equals int val slash 4 or int val equals int val divided by 4. Okay, now there's one more I got to show you. Okay, so let me reset int val to 0. Okay, now there's one operation that's so common, there's even a special one besides just the compound operator for it, and that is incrementing or decreasing by 1. So whenever you have like a for loop, anything like that, it's so common that you want to increase the value by 1. We call it incrementing the value by 1, that there's even a special way to do that that goes even beyond this compound operator. Okay, so if I want to increment by 1, if I use a compound operator, that's going to look like this. Int val plus equals 1, that means int val equals int val plus 1. You increment by 1. Okay, and so if I start with the initial value of 0, then when I do that one operation, I should get 1 as the result. Okay, which I do. Jumping the gun again. Do 1. Okay, but the creators of Java have gone even a step further. So we're even going to shorten this. So this compound operator, that's pretty short. But there's even a shorter way to do it. Okay, and that's to use the so-called increment operator. Okay, like that. Okay, so now that looks kind of funny, double plus. Okay, but that double plus is what's called the increment operator. Int val plus plus means take int val and increment it by 1. Now the increment operator only goes by 1. You can't increase or change by any other value. Okay, 1 is the set amount is going to increment by, but that occurs so often, especially like in for loops and things, that it doesn't really matter. Okay, so when I see that double plus operator, that's the so-called increment operator, and what it does is it takes the value and increases it by 1. Okay, so when I run it, I should get 1 because I start with 0, hit the increment operator, and then it goes to 1, which it does. Okay, so you're going to see that especially in for loops. When we have for loops, when you want to increment your counter by 1, that's a very, very common way of doing that. Okay, now along with that, there's also the so-called decrement operator. So instead of plus plus, if I change that to a minus minus, it's going to have basically the same effect, except instead of adding, I'm going to subtract 1. So if I want to count down instead of count up, I can use my decrement operator. Okay, so if I start with 0 and hit it with the decrement operator, it should give me -1 when I print it out. Okay, so let's just double check. Which it does. Again, jump the gun. I'm so confident and the compiler is so slow that yes, I get -1. Okay, so in addition to the compound operators in Java, you also have the special increment plus plus and decrement minus minus operators. Okay, and those are for the special and very common instance of when you want to increase or decrease by 1 specifically. Okay, so just some kind of neat shortcuts for Java.